All right, Joe. First you, then the business, and it's such an easy question. It's the only scripted one I have. But how did you accidentally fall into franchising? What's your franchise accident story?
I blame it on Domino's Pizza. So Domino's gave me the market to run Little Rock, Arkansas. And my first 6 months, we were up between 50 and 70% each week over last year. And they asked me then to start doing that kind of assistance to help franchisees. So they gave me 118 locations throughout Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, to go ahead and start helping with those franchisees to understand things that they can do different to raise their sales. And that's how I got started.
At that point, two questions. One, did you get the Rolex?
I did.
I love the Rolex. At what point did you understand franchising? Working in franchising is obviously one thing, but the depth of people investing their life savings into the business, the level of control they have, what a P&L looks like. Like, how long did it take you to figure that part out?
Probably about 90 days into it. I had a gentleman in Yazoo, Mississippi, who was doing certain things that weren't within the gambit, but he said, I was trying to do anything to pay bills. And then I had another franchisee who was absent, and he didn't care what it took. He didn't want to put any money into the system. And I had to learn how to look at outside investors versus people who didn't understand the model versus people who really put their whole life savings into it. And it took me about 90 days, and it was a real rude awakening when you're relatively young to figure out, wow, this is a lot of money that some people are wasting and some people have really overinvested.
I love that answer. My comment, a few comments, and then I want yours. One is 90 days, and that's 90 days of you working full time in a business to figure this thing out. And I use that as an example, and I'm intrigued by this because so many franchise brands, if you go to their franchise website, it says, in essence, buy my franchise. But all the people that are sophisticated leaders in the industry, if I ask this question to anyone, it might be 90 days, it might be 6 months, it might be a year. And so for the buyer, we're all like, buy the franchise. And we have all these like sense of urgency, like, where are our leads? I'm like, well, wait a second. It took us 90 days to figure this thing out. And we're expecting a franchise buyer to know it on day one. And so I'm always fascinated by that answer because it's almost like the line has been like franchise development versus franchise sales. Well, the same has to be true on the lead nurturing, because what you said is some franchises that were wasting their money. They made the investment. They were probably sold a franchise. They were sold what this could mean. They didn't understand what franchising was, and the franchisor, right, wrong, or indifferent, didn't take the time to actually educate them of how to do this the right way or qualify them the right way. And then, in my opinion, that's where, like, that's the biggest opportunity for franchise growth is on the educational side, which frankly is where the franchise brokers have made a living out of this. But those are my comments. And I love that answer because it fits into kind of my theory that us as franchisors, we're not educating the franchisee at the level that they probably need to be.
But it's kind of like a relationship. You can't make somebody love you. Okay. So in this aspect, you can't make someone do more due diligence if they didn't want to do it. Yeah. It's kind of like you're driving down the road and you always want a Jeep. And all of a sudden you see Jeeps everywhere, you buy a Jeep. Maybe you didn't do the diligence to find out how often the four-wheel drive has to be checked, or how often do they get broken into, or how often they get stolen, right? And I think sometimes the other party is just as guilty as the franchisor, where they didn't do the due diligence, but they had the cash. Okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think they're just as guilty, but they're the franchise buyer, because most of them are going to invest a significant portion of their life savings into the business that they have little to no control over. They almost trust, and too many of them trust and don't cut the cards.
I agree.
And so when you land with a good franchisor that says, look, I really care about you scaling your business. I care about you hitting your wealth goals, whatever it is. Yes or no, this business makes sense for you. Those tend to be the franchisors that don't just celebrate every deal. They celebrate the franchisees that actually scale.
I think all the franchisors that have people in the field more often than not are the ones who are more successful.
Yeah.
The reason being is because I've talked to a franchisee the other day, and he said, I expected to turn the key and it'd be like McDonald's. My drive-through window would be full and my storefront would always be full. They didn't realize they have to roll up their shirt sleeves, do things in the neighborhood. They have to meet the mayor. They have to meet the people. They have to do school events. They have to do all these aspects to go ahead and build the brand in the neighborhood. And they keep thinking that the big picture is going to do it when sometimes they have to do the macro picture also. Okay.
It's a tremendous line. And I think that's where, unfortunately, now back to the franchisee, no matter what you tell them, once someone makes up their mind that they're going to buy the Jeep, you could say your maintenance costs are going to be ridiculous on this Jeep. I don't know that that's the truth. I've never bought a Jeep and never looked at it. But in that scenario, and no matter what you say, you can say, look, this might not be the right fit for you. When someone makes up their mind, they are pretty dead set on convincing you, like, just give me a chance. Let me get in here, right? So there's equal issues on both sides of that.
Agreed, 100% there. And don't get me wrong, franchisors and franchisees have made mistakes in the past. But as I said, sometimes they just rely on, well, it's a proven model. Well, it is a proven model, but you also have to apply to it, okay?
Yeah, and business is not easy and business isn't guaranteed, right? So let's shift into the brand units. Talk about kind of state of the union. How are things going? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly?
The good is it's a what I would call a recession-proof kind of entity. People are always graduating from university. People always get their first job. People are always upgrading because they have children that need a bigger house. People are always downgrading because the children are all empty nesters. There's always a reason for people moving. And so because of that, they say that the average person moves 13 times in their lifetime. 7 times it's going to be within their own neighborhood. Okay. So that's a good thing that shows that this is a very viable and long sustaining business. Okay. The bad things is it's not for the cheap. When you look at having to start off with 100 containers, 200, 300, and the price structure is a little bit on the high side, it's not for someone to come in here without capital. And so that's probably the hardest thing is my audience is no longer like this. It's a very narrow audience who can afford our franchise. And so our goal is to make sure that A, that we know who the buyer is and that they can afford it. And B, they understand that the long-term ramifications are whether or not you're going to get your return 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, et cetera. Okay.
What's the investment to get in?
Anywhere between $750,000 and $1.5 million. Okay.
Yeah, that's going to give you a very specific buyer. This isn't for people that haven't made some form of wealth in their lives. Like you're looking for someone who has built it up. And what do you put in item 19?
We put in there our actual franchise numbers. We're not afraid to do that. We're very proud of some of the good points, and we understand the bad points. We're not afraid to shy away from that. We try to put in there people that have had experience, more than a year, more than 2 years, and we start to grow with it.
What is the average unit volume currently?
I don't like to say that, and I'll explain to you why. I just moved back to America, and the rules are really funny here. So I will be happy to give you a copy of item 19 and look at it, but I'm not going to quote it just because there are so many different little nuances in America since I moved back here.
Where were you moving from?
I've been living in Cape Town, South Africa, Sydney, Australia, and London.
Oh, that's a life. All still in franchising?
Yes, I ran Domino's Pizza for Australia. I ran Domino's for Europe. I did Pizza Hut South Africa, Botswana, and Nigeria. And then I was over 60 countries with Belfour for 12 years.
Yeah, so the Belfour connection makes probably similar buyer of this business, right?
Very similar, but you can come in there with a lot less money. I would hate to say it's a man in a van, but it is in some aspects. You can walk in with under 100 to 200 grand with some of these great brands that Belfour has, anywhere from timber refinishing to carpet cleaning. They've got some really great products out there. And so it's a little bit more easier to walk into that market than it would be to something to come into ours, which there you're buying a small territory of 60,000 people. Here you're looking at starting off with $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, completely as an outsider, one, I actually appreciate the bigger investments because the beginning of our discussion, I think it eliminates, not completely, but it eliminates some of the folks that are going to buy into this with ambitions that don't align to what the business can potentially do.
Agreed.
So, per what I said, your level of investment, and frankly, if I'm advising a friend or a franchise buyer, I usually say rule of 3, have enough investment room or mentality to get 3, open up 1, have enough for a rainy day, and have enough to scale. Because if you don't scale a business, then you're going to be left being frustrated. And then if I look at the business model, like now you said, it could be 100 units that you're getting as your ramp up. Well, now you can start looking at a P&L per unit and saying, okay, I got to get these out on the street. What is my marketing spend to get them out there? And what is the value of each bin, right? So like, I think that like the structure is good. It's not like people are going to, or a child and say, I've always dreamt of owning this business. It's going to be people that are like, I've always dreamt of being an entrepreneur. Now I can almost become an entrepreneur through acquisition by becoming a franchisee with you guys.
That would be correct. And so we come up with a new program, which is really neat, which is called the Small Market Franchise. And this allows a franchisee to go into smaller markets, Bowling Green, Kentucky, Springfield, Missouri, and be able to come in there with less containers, no warehouse. And so we found a smaller model so we can start competing with mom and pops. And then that way we have our large scale franchises. And then we have our national moving program we call long distance moving that we offer also.
When I looked at the locations or the territories that were available, it did seem to, it's swinging more smaller, which means there's 2 things to that. One, there's a supply and demand issue, which is fantastic to have. That means people clearly were buying things up. And I would imagine that you have multi-unit franchisees who said, I know how much I make on this. I'm going to continue buying territories. But now you figure out a way to say, okay, we still have to perfect what is the cost to get in, how much you can make. Here's how we do it in some of the small markets.
We do. And that's something we looked at hard. I will say we have very few major markets open. El Paso, Albuquerque, Pittsburgh, Portland, Oregon. Outside of that, everything on the big markets are taken. Now we're getting into medium cities, 300 to 400,000 or lower. But as I said, it's something we have to look at. One of the hardest things we're contending with right now is tariffs. We're getting a lot of our products in from overseas, and they come in, they hit the water, and they're one price. When they land, they could be another price. And so that's one of our concerns that we're having right now, is to make sure that we can represent our franchisees with product that's going to be in a stable environment.
I love that you said that. There was a point, I was looking with a friend. I've been in franchising for 20 years. I've never become a franchisee. I've invested in franchisors. We were looking at a garbage bin type distribution business. The gross sales at the corporate unit got up to $4 million. It sounded great, looked great. When we started doing our due diligence on it, and we asked franchisees, okay, so it's a matter of getting these bins out in the marketplace. What's the biggest challenge? And they're like, we can't get the bins. And so it's interesting because there's a lack of transparency by the franchise. We ultimately said no to it. But the lack of transparency, and what you're saying is like, look, we have to be transparent. We got to say, like, here's the situation that we're in. Obviously, it's a great business. We've engineered a great business. We're just dealing with some turbulence. But I would imagine with the history of the company, there's been other moments of turbulence. You just figure out how you muster through and figure out how do you get to the other side of it.
No matter what you're doing in franchising, you're going to have some turbulence. It could be competition. It's going to have someone come in there. I'll give you a great example, like Domino's Pizza and Papa John's. We bought our cheese from the same company. We bought our meats from the same company. We bought our ovens from the same company, our boxes. But they had a slogan that said, better pizza, better toppings. Now, hold on. We're the same product from all the same vendors. How is your product better? But you deal with that. And that's a brilliant move by them. And I really have to salute them for that great marketing scheme they came up with.
Out of curiosity, and this is not meant to be a put down on your current company, but sexy brands, like you worked at like cream of the crop in franchising, where the logo carries tremendous legacy and story. Like, do you miss that, or is it hard to transition out of like the restaurant world, because it's almost a drug in itself?
It is a drug. My children will tell you that, Dad, I worked for this restaurant for a little bit and I really, really liked it. And it was so cool. You get to meet people and it's fast paced and there's cash. I will say food is sexy. Okay. And that's probably the best way to say it. I got to salute you, Nick, on that comment. I will say, though, however, what we're doing now is we're helping so many people. We're helping people who are moving every day, people who are young people. And the big interesting thing is I've got to learn so much about people who are under the age of 38 to 50. Okay. So someone of 38 is using their telephone for everything. They're doing their ordering, they're doing their food, they're doing their scheduling, everything's on there. Some of our franchisees who are a little bit older don't realize that they have to use the phone for everything. So they got to make sure that their microsite is phone capable. They got to make sure that they don't turn off anything, i.e. like ordering or scheduling on the microsite, even though because they so like it land and order better, but you can't because the young people today do everything on the phone. Yeah. So I'm actually feel really good because I'm helping so many people understand the nuances of franchising, the nuances of intellectual property, and the nuances of how things are changing so I can help them adapt to continue to grow strong.
Well, if you go back to the beginning of your story and you're talking about comp sales increases and diving into franchisees, and some saying I've invested every penny and I just got to keep the lights on or I got to hit my payroll. What your career was built around wasn't food. It was about helping humans. And so that's probably where you land the plane on your career. You're able to say like, yes, the widget was awesome. Pizza, it's hard to argue. I actually love Domino's pizza. It's hard to argue the taste of that product, but what you were doing was what was behind it, which was helping humans.
And I've carried that on here. So we've got programs. If you're up 15% in sales, we drop off one royalty. If you're up 30%, we drop off another royalty point. If you go into a new market, we're going to give you reduced royalties for the first 6 months, reduced royalty, and then a little bit tiered up. I call it the tiered marketing program. And then the next 6 months, it's a little bit higher the next 6 months. And I'm trying to do these things to go ahead and encourage franchise growth. I have another program. If franchisee recommends us a franchisee that we didn't get organically or through a broker, then we'll pay our franchisee $15,000 cash. So we're very interested in growth right now.
I love that. I'm gonna ask you for a closing statement in a second, but I'm gonna say this. Everything you're saying, what we just talked about, people and how you help franchisees who can help their communities, like it's so deep. If I bought the business today, I would blow up that franchise website that just says franchise opportunity. There's no human touches. Like you're such a beautiful business, but you've almost made that just so stagnant. Like it does, like the emotional side of what you just said, even like the fact, like really what you were just talking about is we partner with our franchisees. We celebrate in their successes by giving them incentives to get to the success level because it's going to help them feed their families and build the wealth that they want. That's nowhere to be found in your storytelling. So unsolicited, I'd blow that thing up, start over and go back to what you just said 3 minutes ago and just say, that's what our website is.
So I will go ahead and take a stick of dynamite, write your name on there, throw it in the website, and I will tell our marketing team we're going to start over.
Yeah, you blame me for all that. All right, Joe, close with this. Like, I think the last statement was important. I overused the statement, bet on the jockey, not on the horse. I would bet on you as you know how to help me understand business. You understand how to help me understand scale. You help me understand how I reach my goals clearly with all the things we just talked about. Is there anything else, if there's a buyer out there that's watching this, and obviously you have select markets available, the major markets are gone, but they're watching this. What do you want them to know about the business?
So on the side, I do marriage counseling and I wrote a book on marriage. Okay. So I look at franchising very much similar to a marriage where you have two parties. And the question is, you got your goals. There's going to be a honeymoon period. There's going to be a very nice relationship period. Then you're going to have some children, i.e., locations. And then it's going to get some roughy road. The question is, how do we deal with that rocky road? How do we deal with the relationship? How do we look long-term? And how do we continuously work together for that 5-year, 10-year, 20-year renewals? And so my only suggestion would be is let's not look at every day as catastrophic. Let's look at every day as we're a team. How do we work together? How do we get over these speed bumps? They're not mountains, they're speed bumps. And how do we get over these today? How do we get them tomorrow? And how do we stay married for this long period of the contract? And that's probably what I would leave as a thought.
Love it. I think that last part, the marriage counseling, I bet you that gives you another great tool to use when looking at these franchisees and working with them. So, Joe, I'm grateful that you gave me some of your time. Thanks for sharing some of your story with us.
You're very kind. Thanks, Nick, and thanks for what you do for franchising.
For Joe, I'm Nick. This was another episode of Meet the Franchise. Take care.